Coach Huddy, and I'm joined again as my co-host, the coach's wife, Amanda. And today we got a very special guest. I'm so glad I get to talk to him because I'm a huge fan of proactive coaching. We got her with us, Rob Miller. Rob Miller is former director of the NAIA Champions of Character Initiative. Rob now works for proactive coaching, and it helps him. The whole idea behind proactive coaching, I'll have Rob kind of get in more detail about, but just an overview. Help improve character, confidence within the culture of sports. He's a speaker. He goes around the country giving talks. So he's also, I believe you just stepped away a year or two ago from being the commissioner at one of the IA conferences there, right? It was the Wolverine Hoosier Conference. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, retired from that about 2.5 years ago now. So
Okay. So yeah. So he's got tons of experience, coaching experience, everything else. So again, Rob, welcome, and let's get started here. Let's start with your background. Let's start all the way back to when you started playing sports. How did you growing up in sports, how did that help shape you, who you are now, and what sports were you got interested in, I guess, when you were younger?
yeah, I was very fortunate. I grew up in a small town in Michigan. It was ag town. My dad was a large animal veterinarian. We all went out for everything, played all the sports. So I played four sports during my time in high school. At the high school, I played football, I played basketball, I played tennis, and then I was on a summer baseball team. I think probably the one I learned the most from was baseball because it's the one I loved, but it's the one I was by far the worst at. Okay. And I couldn't hit. I was a bad catcher. I just wasn't very good. And I think that helped me because it made me understand, you know, you're going to be different in different areas. And I kind of turned my attention, I loved all three other sports, but basketball kind of became my sport. It's the one I think I was good at it. To be honest, I liked a warm gym versus outside in Michigan, playing outside Michigan. And that kind of shaped me a little bit. And I had great people around me, great teammates, great coaches. And it became something I loved. And I just wanted to keep doing it because I loved it so much.
Nice. So when did you realize that coaching was going to be a part of this? So you talked about basketball being in your wheelhouse. And I loved how you're talking about baseball, how even though you struggled at it, you learned the most from. And I think sometimes a failure is obviously, I think, is where we learn the most from is if we can learn how to take failure as a teaching experience. I think that we help ourselves a lot. So I like how you brought that to the forefront or the attention that we're looking for here. When did you realize coaching though was something that you wanted to get into?
I think I always wanted to coach. I wanted to coach when I was in high school because I loved my teachers who were my coaches. I also, I played college basketball, and I think that's when it really sank in that this is what I want to do. I want to be a coach. And so as I was playing, I was already looking at how I wanted to be a coach when I got out of it. So that happened very early in my career.
Nice. Is there certain coaches in particular that kind of helped impact how you got into the game? As there parents that helped influence you to kind of lead you to the path you're on? So any
Yeah,
details there that you could share?
I love, I saw that question on the list and it just hit me because I was blessed. I had great coaches, but I also didn't have very many because small school, everybody coaches everything, right? So I had three primary
Yep.
coaches in high school, and I think I learned something from all of them. My varsity football coach was my varsity basketball coach. And what I learned from Coach McCullen was really how to be fundamentally sound. I think that helped. He was a fundamental coach. He taught the game, and that really helped me. And I just enjoyed playing for him. My tennis coach, Coach Pauly, made it fun. I mean, he had the perfect balance between we're going to get after it, we're going to compete, but we're going to have fun doing it. And then Coach Gardy, who was the assistant on the football team, but I had him as our head coach for JV basketball. He's the one I'll never forget. He won't remember this. But when I was a freshman, I'll never forget when he looked at me one day and said this, when you believe in yourself like we believe in you, you're going to be okay. And that thing changed my life right there. I just say that was a changing point in my life. So those three, and then my college coach, who I just saw, he turned 87 about 3 weeks ago, and I had a chance to see him earlier this week. He was instrumental in so many ways. He was a great mentor. He let me be his assistant coach for a couple years, but also his mind knew the game, and so I learned so much. So I had this good balance across the board from different philosophies, but also different approaches, and it helped me in every way.
Can I just say that I love that statement? If you believed in yourself half as much as we do, or or knew what you were capable of half as much as we do, then you would be basically unstoppable. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it is.
I
I
think
love that statement. Go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, I mean, if kids understood how much people do believe in them, I think it'd be amazed.
Yeah, it's definitely something with youth. I think anybody, I think it applies to it applies to adults, I think too, but just, having that, trying to get them to understand how important and how much we believe in them and within their capabilities and have that faith in them, I think can go a long ways. And so that's a great statement. All right, let's go move on here a little bit. Let's talk about how you came in contact with proactive coaching. So when I originally reached out, I was reaching out to Bruce Brown, which I have had fortunate enough to listen at a coaching clinic up in Oregon one time. And before that, a couple of videos had come out in our AD at the time where I was working at. I got to see Bruce or see his videos, some of his videos, and I was like, wow, I love his philosophy, what he's got going on. So for you, how did you first come in contact with proactive coaching?
It was right around 2001, 2001. And I joined the NAIA national office, and they wanted me to come in the coaching aspect and develop basically a character and sport program for coaches and for athletes. And one thing I told our CEO at the time was coaches do not live in a philosophical world. They live in an application based world. So I don't want this to be about, oh, let's all just be good people, da, 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 da. I want it to be something application based because that's where coaches live. And I had a friend who was an AD at a college up in Seattle, and she told me there's this guy that's working a little bit with us, but he's a retired coach up here in the Seattle area, and this is what he does. And so I went up and listened to him. And I'll be honest, as soon as I heard Bruce talk, I called back to our CEO and I said, I hope you have the money because I just hired a guy. Okay. So I mean, he was like, same thing with you. He impacted me that much to say, that's what I'm visioning. That's what I wanted to do as a coach. And I hopefully did as a coach, but that's verbalizes it and it's application based. And so that's how I met with Bruce, and we were together at the NAIA for 8 years. And then we just got a lot of speaking. We still work closely with the NAI, but we branched out. I joined his company at Proactive Coaching, and now we've been doing this since. So I've been doing this with him since 2008.
Nice. That's incredible. And so let's lead into what proactive coaching is. Yeah.
Is our goal is to work with coaches, teams, athletes, parents, whoever it is within that, to build an intentionally based culture. And it's a culture based on leadership and character because we believe that increases performance. So it's not taken away from the X and O's, it's adding to the X and O's. But it's also to be intentional about it. What are we teaching our young people that they can live out in their lives? Okay. So let's use sport as the vehicle because I think so many people assume sport teaches character, but every study alive shows just the opposite. The longer you're involved in sport, the more moral reason and ethical behavior go down. So it's not the activity that provides it, it's the coach slash teacher that provides it. And so our goal is to work with them to develop this intentionally based culture because we believe that will make a better experience, but it will also allow your team to produce at a higher level. And so it's twofold. Okay. It's performance based and it's culture based. But it's also like I talked about earlier, we're trying to give them strategies and tactics they can put in practice tomorrow, not just talk at 30,000 feet. Coaches and athletes don't live at 30,000 feet. We live at 3 feet. So what are we going to take that we can implement tomorrow in practice that will help our team develop this culture?
Like it. So let's talk about just youth sports a little bit. So let's look at this approach of traditional coaching and how we approach youth versus what proactive is doing. What is a way that some of the issues that we see right now in youth sports, obviously there's some negativity going around, around it. And how do we rein this in? How does proactive help rein in some of this negativity that's been going around in sports, with, behaviors that are bleeding into sports. We have ref shortages, stuff like that that's happening. How do we help parents understand and help them work towards helping build this character that we're looking for? And how can parents help coaches with that goal to work with the youth in sports, I guess?
I think there's a couple different things. And the first, let's talk about coaches. And I still think there's a lot of great stuff happening in youth sport. There's a lot of awesome stuff happening. But I also believe this: we've come to a point where we're teaching schemes, not skills, and we're playing a lot of games we're
Yes.
not practicing. Okay,
Right.
so we're
Yes.
playing games, we're not practicing, we're teaching schemes, we're not teaching skills. So with that aspect, kids are bigger, stronger, and faster than they've ever been, but less fundamentally sound than they've ever been. I think we got to talk to coaches about the fact of just don't play games. In fact, I just heard this from my sister. Yeah, my what I guess we would call my grandnephew is playing indoor soccer. They never practice. They just play games. Drives me nuts. Just drives me
Yeah.
nuts. Okay. They just go to game. Okay. So why are we in this? Okay. And hopefully, as youth coaches, let's concentrate on making them better athletes and better people. So when we hand them off to the next coach, we give them not just a better player, but we also give them a better teammate. So that's kind of a big picture, but that's one. Parents, I think I always start with this because they're investing a lot right now, time, money for youth sports. Okay. It's not like it used to be. It's a lot of time, a lot of money. My question for them is, what are you looking for on your return on investment? And if it's scholarship or prestige, you're going the wrong way. It should be about what is our kids learning that are going to make them better teammates for life. And that's if we get people to think that. Now, those are both big pictures. Then we can start getting down to from 30,000 feet to 3,000 feet to 30 feet to 300 feet to 3 feet. But until we get them on the right scheme up here, it's going to be hard to change anything down here.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And the fundamentals is huge. And, travel sports has kind of come in to play for several sports, basketball, baseball, softball, you name it. And where you're paying about a weekend, 8 or 9 games a week, where in your practice schedules, you just don't have the practice built into it, and it's more games oriented. And like you said, you're not getting that development. The kids are getting a lot of game experience, but the foundation of
Well,
that, it's
game
not.
experience only goes so far if you know what you're doing with that experience.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And
100%. Yeah.
I try to talk to coaches, and Gino says this a lot in his stuff, coach from Connecticut. But, you look at the European model versus the US model. Europeans, they're practicing 5, 6 times a week and playing one game, and we're playing 5 or 6 games for one practice. And so any coach listening out there,
Right.
look at your ratio. You should be practicing 3, 4, 5 times for every one game. That's going to help kids far
No.
more sending them out playing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I had heard that before in how Europe and how how they build their youth sports is, to me, that's the model to be shooting for. And right now it's the dynamics of what's going on, because money's driving a lot of the youth sports now, especially with travel sports and stuff like that. So that's kind of, I think, hindering this progress because, like you said, these kids are bigger, stronger, faster than anything that we had when we were younger. So
I'd be curious to look at statistics on long-term or more severe injuries today in athletes than they were 15, 20 years ago because they're
It's a
bigger and
little.
stronger, but they don't know what they're doing with that.
Yeah, I think that the key in that too is there's a study out, and I think it's by the American Physicians Association. I can't remember. And it came out about 6, 7, 8 years ago now. But it basically says this, and that doesn't point so much to what you're talking about, but it points to the specialization, okay, of one sport. And kids who specialize, I think the data says, are 50% more likely to get injured because of overuse injuries. And so
yeah, yeah,
there
I
is
think
some
I
data
think it
out there.
does. Yeah, and the specialization of sports, that's another part of this is that, you know, I've always been an advocate for doing multiple sports, and I try to explain to kids, try to play, if they're a football player, hey, go do wrestling, because that's hand to hand combat, or go do track and field where they can teach you how to run, do other sports to help build on the sport that you really do like. And that's kind of always been what I look at. And on top of that, also take breaks. I think right now, I know there's kids that are students of mine, players of mine, former players that are constantly playing sports year round. There's like no break. Yeah, if not, some are doing two at a time. Like they're trying to do softball during volleyball season because there's a fall league for softball or whatever. And it's just like the burnout. So that not just the physical demands that you're put on your body, but the mental part of that. And I just think for some people, the burnout can catch up to you. So I think that's something that obviously needs to be addressed as well.
I'm a big proponent, and I don't even say multi-sport, I say multi-activity, because I don't care if it's FFA, I don't care if it's play, I don't care if it's band, be involved in other things. Saying that, coming back to you're trying to play 2 sports at one time, the one thing I really tell, and this is as much a parent thing as it is an athlete thing, I remind them, overcommitment leads to undercommitment. And if you're overcommitted to
Yep.
2 or 3 things in a season, you're not committed to anything.
Right. Yeah, and I've seen it before. I've seen it. I remember when our daughter was playing softball in rec league, and we had one or two girls that were doing the rec league and doing the travel ball, and so there was times there was conflicting things. So they would have to go play a game with so and so, or they can't make this practice because they got this going on. So yeah, it totally happens. You're not. That's one thing we always told our daughter was that, you know because I think there was a time she was asked if she wanted to do track and field and play softball. And we are like, told her this kid, no, please pick one because you're going to do a disservice to one of the other coaches who you're playing for. She made that choice, but she was well-rounded and everything else. We had her, she did choir, was drama. She was involved in other things, which I encourage kids to do, find some other passion to help balance your life. So yeah, totally. All right, let's talk a little bit about what coaching for significance means and why is culture more important than the rules. So one of the things
Yeah,
that
I could
proactive
tell
is building that culture. So let's go a little more into that.
coaching for significance, I think, kinda comes off to what I said earlier. What are you teaching your kids that they can live out in their life? There's some sports where we can teach them the skills of the sport, and they're gonna use it the rest of their life. Golf, tennis, running, all those swimming. There's things we can teach in those sports they'll use the rest of their life. I'm a basketball coach, okay? One of my biggest fundamentals that I teach is boxing out. Okay. Where else in life are they ever going to box out? Okay. Yeah. Walmart, maybe. Okay. When you're going through line. But where else are we going to use that? So what can you teach them? And each sport can teach something different, but that's coaching for significance. What are you training them through your sport? They're going to use as a spouse, they're going to use it as an employee, they're going to use it as a leader. What are we teaching them? That's coaching for significance. Okay. Culture versus rules. Okay. And I would put it this: standards versus rules. Okay. And standards are part of our culture. We call them covenants. But with that said, is this: when you're building and striving to reach a standard as part of your culture, you're finding people ascending. When you have rules, you find people breaking them. Okay. So that's number one. Do I want to reward people who are reaching a standard, or do I want to talk about breaking a rule? Reaching a standard. Okay. There's consequences if you make poor decisions, but we're not going to constantly focus on rules. We're going to focus on standards, because the other thing is this: how many rules are you going to come up with to cover everything that's going to happen? You'll need
Right.
1,000. Okay. Here's one standard. And this is a Bruceism. Okay. Bruce Brown. Okay. Don't let your teammates down. What doesn't that cover?
Yeah.
There's a standard. Don't let your
There
teammates
you
down.
go.
That covers everything. Okay. And it also gives me some discretion to work with that athlete, depending on if they failed at that, I have some discretion to work with that athlete on that issue. So that's kind of the difference between standards and rules, developing your culture. So we're striving to reach the culture versus we always got to watch out for somebody breaking a rule.
Love it. Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. And I try to bring that when I was into coaching was that, remember who you're playing for. Remember you're representing your school, you're representing your community, you're representing the name on your back, and you're playing for the people that are in front of you right now. So, just in that, so that falls into that, don't let your teammates down. You're not letting your community down, and so forth.
That goes back to the significance of things. I think that applies to everything. If you don't see the bigger picture, or you don't feel like it has a bigger picture, or that you're playing a bigger part or a part of a bigger scheme, then how much are you really going to put into it? How much are you going to try to make yourself a big enough or part of that bigger picture? Or sit back and be like, oh, well, yeah, I didn't have any part in that.
That's right. Ownership. It comes back to culture gives ownership.
Yes.
The
Yes,
great Pat Summitt,
ownership. Yeah,
the great Summit put it this way, right? The greatest weapon we have on any team is ownership. And one of the things I try to work with at high school and colleges is this. Some of the best teams at your school might have nothing to do with athletics, so learn from them. I was on a state championship football team. The best team at our school was the FFA. Let's learn from them. We can learn from each other. And I love how you put that, seeing the big picture. I was at Ohio State about 3 weeks ago and walked into the room I was presenting in, and there was a sign up on there. And I love this. Okay. And it works for youth sports, high school sports, college sports. It said this: honor the past, maximize the present, impact the future. That's pretty good philosophy to have right there.
yes, that is a great philosophy. I love that. Yeah, I love that. So let's talk about coaches' misunderstanding of culture building. What are some things that happen that maybe coaches get wrong when they're trying to build this culture? You kind of talked a little bit about ownership. We kind of talked about, you know, uh, we talked about the understanding the coaching for significance. How do coaches somehow? What are some missteps that can happen on this way when you're trying to build this culture? That maybe some pitfalls that the coaches have.
I think there are three things I'll mention, but I think I'll start with this. I think most coaches today certainly understand culture is important because Bruce and I laugh when we started at this in 2000. There's only about 3 companies talking about culture in the country. Now there's about 3,000. Okay. That's
Right.
a good thing. That's a good thing. That means people recognize it. But I think when it comes down to it, there's 3 things I would mention that we have to overcome. One, we just can't think it's going to happen because we have good kids on our team or good leaders. We have to be intentional about it. It has to be part of our practice plan. You'll never find a great team that's all about performance without culture and leadership building. And you'll never find a great team that's about culture and leadership building without teaching performance. That's hand in hand that they have to come. So it has to be intentional part of our program and what we put in every day. The second thing is it has to be consistent. I think sometimes coaches, time is such an important element when it comes to coaching. I think sometimes we think, I can't waste 10 minutes today talking about leadership and culture because I need to get more reps in. One team we work with, and again, I'm talking about colleges a lot, but we work mostly with high schools. But one team that we work with is Vanderbilt baseball. Vanderbilt baseball, top team in college baseball. They spend time every day working on culture and leadership. Okay. You need to find the time. But the third thing, I think maybe the key thing, and that's this: we need to be clear what we're talking about, because I hear a lot of coaches talk about, they come up with their t-shirt slogan or their banner statement, which is great. But think about it this way. If I have 50 kids, I'm coaching a wrestling team and I got 40 kids on my team. And I say, guys, we're going to be about respect. Well, if I had 40 guys write their definition about respect, and I write my definition about respect, and my assistants write their definition about respect, how many different definitions about respect are we going to have? Probably about
42.
43.
Yeah, 42.
Yeah, right? We better get on the same page. So we've got to be clear about what it really means. So I think how we overcome the hurdles in culture is be intentional, be consistent, and be clear.
I love it. Yeah,
I like, yeah, be intentional.
always being intentional. I love that. Okay, one other question before we move on to the next topic. Burnout is a thing with coaches. I mean, we kind of talked about players a little bit, how that can happen because, you get involved too much. But coaching burnout's a real thing. How do we help coaches, especially younger coaches that are trying to get at it? Sometimes they seem they get overwhelmed a little bit. How do we help them, coaches, with that feeling, and what's something they can do to kind of avoid that or manage that better?
Yeah. I think there's a couple areas in this way, because it is hard. Because I mean, when I got into, I'm 62, so I've been in the profession for 40 years, right? When we started way back when, coaches, most coaches, especially at the high school level, were coaching 2 or 3 different sports, which gave that nice variety, okay? In summers, though you did summer programs, you might have been half the summer you were with your team, half the summer you weren't, okay? Now, it's a full year round. No one pays you anymore, but you have to go full year round to coach your sport, right? And we become single sport at it. And so I think the burnout's there. And then all the now, not only are you supposed to coach the sport, you're supposed to get every kid on your team a scholarship. So you need to be promoting them. You need to be an expert in this, an expert in that, an expert in this. So you got these things going on. How do we do that? And I think always come back to your why. Why do you start coaching? Usually comes down to 2 reasons. You love the activity and you like working with kids. You got to keep that at the forefront and let all this other stuff go away. Yesterday, I was at Kansas State, and you probably saw their football coach retired 2 days ago. Okay. He's still young, Chris Kleiman, good coach. But you knew it was coming because you saw him talking about, I don't coach anymore. I go around and I have to offer kids and develop contracts. That's not coaching. Okay. So for those of us that aren't at that level, okay, we have to figure out, stay to your process and stay inside your thing. Yes, there'll be other things to go around that, but don't let that become the center. Let your center be your why, the love of the game, and let it also be, working with kids. Always concentrate on that. That gives you energy. Okay. That gives you energy. Second is this: you better be intentional about making sure you stay healthy physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Okay. And that might mean this. I've said this to a coach a couple years ago. They were in mid-season, a very good basketball team. And we were talking. He said, yeah, I think we're tired. I know I'm tired. I said, take a day off. Take a day off. I mean, take 2, instead of practicing today, don't let anybody in the gym. You go home, spend time with your family. You'll be okay. Okay. We don't have to be in the gym constantly. Now, I'm not going to take many days off. It's not going to happen often. It's not going to happen 5 times in the year. It may happen once every 2 or 3 years, but be okay with that and find time for yourself. But I do want to mention this. One coach I work with, a college softball coach, and she has 3 young boys. And I just think about that. You're a college softball coach and you have 3 boys under 10. Okay. It's
Boy.
wild. Wild, right? What she did though was this, and I loved it. Those 3 sons of hers have 25 sisters, the softball team,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And so you always take care of your core family first, but we have this other family. Why not make sure the 2 can go hand in hand and work together? Because that will, 1, provide less time because now a lot of times we're together. 2, I watch those girls take care of those 3 boys, which gives coach more time to focus on other things. But I also watch those kids having a chance to be with mom versus just mom being on the road all the time. You got to find ways to
Yeah.
match things going on.
Yeah. And I heard that before at a coaching clinic. It was a football coach in one of the Division I schools. And he was talking about that, because coaching commitment takes a lot from your own family, having ways to involve them as much as you can, and they would have early morning meetings, about what they were going to have going on for the day and stuff like that. And, he encouraged, like, hey, if you got your kids with you, you can have them in there in the meeting, bring them to the meeting, and, he'd have coaches have these 2-year-olds crawling on him, while they're having their talks. But, he was always about family. And that has to be part of that your job. I mean, it has to be there. I think it helps keep you grounded too and keeping yourself successful, because we know the divorce rate that happens with coaches is so prevalent that family has to be a part of that so you don't have those problems later on.
Well, taking it back to the whole burnout question at the beginning of that conversation was, how do we keep coaches, there? How do we keep them in it for the right reasons? And I think that my takeaway from it is, you cannot let the expectations around you overweigh reality. You have to be in the present. You have to be in what is realistic and why you're doing something in the first place, and kind of not push aside, but put into perspective that, my kid's going to be the next, top athlete in the D1 school. Like, be realistic about it. And you can't spend all of your time as a coach promoting what these parents and these kids and want when it takes away from their realisticness of the sport and what you're trying to accomplish in the first place.
And you just gotta be clear in
Right.
stating those at the forefront. Here's what I'm gonna be doing, and that way the expectations are clear. They may not like it, but they're clear. And then I just did that with this. I think Chuck Noll put it great, the former Pittsburgh Steelers coach, when he told his coaching staff. Tony Dungy talks about this all the time. Guys, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. Meaning, have yourself organized as a coach. Know exactly what you're gonna do, be organized, be efficient. And it comes back to the Wooden quote. Activity does not mean achievement. Focus on achievement. And today, if we're only working on 3 things and we can get that done in an hour, there's no reason to practice for 3 hours. Get done what we need to get done and get out. Achievement over activity. That's a key. We have to be more efficient in how we're doing things as well.
Totally agree. Yep. Couldn't have said it better. All right, let's move on to supporting parents in youth sports, and talk about how proactive coaching has been a part of educating parents. I know one of the very first videos I watched with Bruce Brown was he had parents in there and he was talking about parents' expectations and how you should approach your athlete. And, you know, if you really want to find your success in your kid, is how he was explaining these advice. He was giving his advice, I guess, on how to let your kid find the most success. So why is parent education such a big part of proactive coaching, I guess, would be the best way to ask this question.
Yeah, I'll start with this general statement. When coaches and parents work together, athlete wins. When coaches and parents work apart, athlete loses. So just start with that premise. So we want to work together, not apart. The second thing I talked to you about with young coaches is this: focus on the 99% of parents, not the one. Because 80% of all parents you never have issues with. And sometimes we group all these parents and our parents are horrible. No, they're not. 80% are great. Okay. And guess what? There's some you'd like to have more involved, right? As teachers, who doesn't show up to parent teacher conferences? The ones we need. Okay. Same
Right.
thing. I want my
Yep.
parents involved. Okay. If we're working together, the kid wins. 19% you may have some issues with. Well, have strong standards of good communication. Don't worry about the 1% that thinks you're the worst coach ever, because they think everybody's the worst coach ever but them. Okay. Those are as you see them all the
Right.
time. Focus on the 99. Easier said than done. But that's why we believe parent education is important, because we want to work together. Then that message just kind of goes from you heard it. I think the big thing is, and I'll just say this and we can ask follow-up questions, is look at it from what the kid wants out of us as a parent, not what we wanted out of it for our kid. Okay. Now that doesn't mean we don't take away from encouraging our kids to be engaged on teams, not sitting at home playing video games all the time. No, we can do that as parents. That's our job. Okay. To get them involved and show them opportunities. But once they're in the opportunity, let it be their experience, not our experience.
Right. And that's something that is always everybody I've talked to that I've had on my show. That's always a big thing, is just, it's all about the kids, and, we see how sometimes egos of parents, and they see however their kids' performance is a reflection on them, and it's not. And, trying to just let the kids have fun. I think fun is something that sometimes gets sucked out of sports because it becomes more about, it's all about the wins and losses. And for me, I want to be a part of a team that is having fun, because I think the wins will come later. If you are working on developing your kid and you're going through the fundamentals and stuff like that, the winning eventually will come. And so this statement that gets brought up a lot, I mean, you could probably expand on this, is saying to your kid that I love to watch you play. That to me is a very powerful statement. Anything you want to expand on that saying, or anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, let me kinda come back and kinda go you kinda hit 3 areas there. First one is this, okay? You used the word fun, okay? Well, one of the reasons it's important to work with parents is for this reason. What's the definition of the word fun mean? For little kids, it means being silly. For high school varsity athletes, it usually means being good. We respond differently to that. And by the way, that's why I love middle school coaches like you. Why? You got 20 kids on your team,
Yeah.
10 are trying to be silly, 10 are trying to be good. I can't do that. You can. I don't wanna do that. It's a circus. Okay. Uh, and saying that, talked about the other thing. You know what parents have to learn how to do? Let their kids fail. And what I tell parents all the time
Oh
is
yeah.
this, at full effort and full attention, I want your son to fail or your daughter to fail, and I want them to fail big at full effort, full attention. But if they fail at less than full effort, full attention, that's unacceptable, and I'm gonna be all over them for that. Okay. So you educate them why we're doing what we're doing. That leads it to I love to watch you play. And I think the biggest reason for that statement is this. What we have found and what our parents' message is based on was Bruce talking to kids for over 35 years what they wanted out of the athletic experience. And a lot of kids base their value to their parents based on performance. We don't want that. We do not want that. So I love to watch you play means however you play, good or bad, I just love seeing you engaged and involved. And I want to share just a funny story with you with Bruce. He has 5 daughters, okay? Think about that. And his last daughter played on the high school varsity team, basketball team, but didn't play a whole lot. But she knew how Bruce to use that phrase, "I love to watch you play," because Bruce had that happen to him 20 years ago, and that's where this phrase caught on 20, 25 years ago. "I love to watch you" phrase is something that happened with Bruce. So he's been using that, and it's kinda gone viral. So Allie did not play a whole lot, okay? She was a role player. She didn't play much, okay? So they're driving home one day after a game, okay? And she's a card. She's funny. And she didn't play that night. So she looked at her dad and said, "What are you gonna say to me tonight, Dad? I didn't play." He looked at her and said, "Allie, I love to watch you warm up." Hey, find something fun to happen. Kids should never see their value to their parents based on their performance in a game.
Never. No, I totally agree with that. What, I guess, let's try and hear the best way to say this. What is something that parents usually get right, but what are and where do things derail? I guess what is something they get right and maybe something that they could work on to be better at?
I think, what to get right, I think, because it's the one thing I think kids want more than anything else. I'm not saying it's 100%, but I think most parents get this right, to be there when they can be there. Kids want their parents at games. Now, unless they go overboard and they start acting like idiots and jerks, they don't want them there. 99% of parents want their kids at the game. That's the thing I think we have done very well. We show up, and that's what our kids need, okay? They need that because they'll remember. They might not remember every game you've been at, but they'll remember the few games you didn't come to. Now, let me paraphrase. Let me put an asterisk on that. They do understand there's times you can't be there. I was in a farming community, played football on Friday nights. Guess what? There was usually one Friday night in late September, no farmers that had kids on the team were at the game. That's harvest time.
Right.
Kids
That's
get that.
harvest.
That
Yep.
kids get that, but they don't get when we just don't show up and we're someplace else. So that I think we do pretty well. I think where we derail it is kind of what I talked about. We either in the car ride on the way home, we start analyzing performance for them. They don't want that. They need time and space to recover. And we become what we want to become is coach. Don't be their coach. You're their parent, not their coach. Okay. Let coach, you parent. And sometimes we don't understand our role. In fact, I'll put it this way. You talked about referee shortage earlier. When parents rip on referees, all we do is tell young people, I don't want to referee. I put it this way. I'll gladly go to Michigan State and referee a basketball game and get abused for $3,000, $4,000. Call me whatever you want if I'm running up and down the court making 3,000, 4,000. But I'm not going to do that youth or high school game for $35 to $50.
Right.
And we're losing all of our officials because we're harassing them. Know your role. Don't be an official, be a parent. Don't be a coach, be a parent. Don't be a player, be a parent. And That's the one where I think we try to stretch out. We try to say, I'd coach it like this. Here's one thing I would throw in there to close this. Never put your son or daughter in a position they have to choose between coach and you. And by the
Yeah.
way, coaches, if I'm the kid's coach, I should never put your kid in a position they have to choose between parent and me. That's where we fail as adults. We shouldn't put them in that position.
Yeah, and I agree. Going back a little bit to the ref thing, one thing, and I had this happen a couple days ago. Middle school girls come in and they talk about their basketball game. And they're just like, the refs were so horrible. And I go, stop. I've told my high school kids this. I tell them to stop right away because I used to ref basketball. And so I'm just like, stop right there. We're done. And I says, you need to stop. I says, and I started ripping, and not just ripping on them, but I was kind of telling them they need to stop. And I said, and I said bitching to the kids because I was like, because that's the one thing that bothers me more than anything is when I start hearing the first thing they say is when they start ripping on refs. I go, stop. I said, you guys have got to stop this. I said, this is a problem. I said, your parents have got to stop this. And I said, the reason why you guys are not getting that rep quality right now is that, first of all, you're a tiny school. That doesn't help. You're doing middle school. You're usually going to get refs there who are learning. And so you need to understand that you guys being negative like this, and then your parents being negative on top of that, I said, that's not the way to approach this. I said, you got to understand that you have to be responsible for your own actions. The ref's not shooting the basketball. The ref's not making the bad passes, the turnovers. Yeah, they're going to miss calls. It's going to happen. They're learning and they're human. He goes, please don't come to me again about talking about how bad the refs are in a game. I say, you got to learn that it's a not a good position to be in when you're constantly going down court and you're getting verbally abused all the time. And then they decide, I don't want to do this. Like you said, for 35, $50 a game, this is not worth it.
Not really.
And yeah, so yeah,
One thing I
totally on
told
the
a
ref
team
thing. Go ahead.
Yeah. I told a team one time, I said, you're sitting here talking about their bad calls. You realize they're driving home and talking about how bad passes you made and your turnovers and everything. So, I mean, you don't want them talking about you.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Let's talk. So we talked about trying to stay in your lane. Obviously the car ride home is a huge one. That's the one thing with parents, your kid's exhausted. They need time to recover. They need time to process. They don't want to rehash something they just did 20, 30 minutes ago back on the ride home. So, I'm always been like, if they want to talk about it, be a listening board. That was one thing I was given a suggestion by another guy, be a listening board if they want to talk about it. If they don't want to talk about it, just let them process the game themselves, process their emotions, let them have that moment to themselves. And how, moving on to the next part of this, is parents handling the emotion of the game, the mistakes that happen in the game, the playing time. So this is something that parents see. And like we talked about, a lot of times they see what the performance of their kid is a reflection on them. What is some suggestions for parents to handle playing time, when a kid makes mistakes, how they react, the emotional part of the game? What's some advice for parents to keep their emotions in check when it comes to what's going on with things like playing time mistakes and stuff like that?
First thing I think people have to understand is value is not determined by playing time. So the guy who scores a lot of points for me as a coach is very important to me, but they're no more important to me than the kid that never plays but gives me effort every day in practice. So as coaches, we got to make sure we're understanding our kids have to feel valued no matter what their role is. So if parents see us valuing every kid, that helps with them to see that. But on the other hand, I think parents have to understand your child does not have to play a lot to get good from the activity. We're teaching them things, coaching for significance. They're going to use the rest of their lives, whether they're playing or not. And my value to them, again, is not tied to whether or not they're for me, a basketball coach, on the court, on the field, on the mat, in the meet, whatever it is. So I think that's one thing we have to have that conversation with them. Your kid is valued regardless of playing time. And now, How do they respond to it? One, I think we have to talk to them about learning and teachable moments, meaning your kid's going to fail. When they fail, we need to correct that. If that failure is at full effort and full attention, I need to have that conversation with parents so they understand how that's working. Once they understand it, they won't assume, because I think a lot of it is assumption. Coach doesn't like my kid because he pulled him out in that situation. Well, maybe I need to pull him out to tell him something to help him get better. Okay. Now, if they're not giving full effort and full attention, I'm pulling them out because I'm unhappy with them. Okay. What's the difference between me being unhappy with them and me providing instruction? That's my job. My job is to coach. Okay. So I think there's a lot of that we have to help them with. But I think the big thing is we have to work with parents to understand this. Focus on your child's effort and attitude, not their bottom line stat result. Okay. Because look at it this way, and I'll use a track analogy. Your kid goes to a track and cross country race. They set a PR. You wanted them to finish top 5. They set a PR and finished 23rd. Does that mean they failed that day? No.
No,
They gave
no,
total effort,
never.
total attention, performed well. They finished 23rd. But how? I mean, you got to celebrate that. Okay. You guys, what are we doing? Focus on effort and attitude, not results, because results are not always in our control. Playing time is not in our control. What can you do? Here's what I talk to parents about. You should talk to coaches about 3 things. 3 things are because they're your job as well as my job as a coach. Okay. One, if your son or daughter's hiding an injury, talk to the coach because welfare is number 1 for both of us. Okay. Number 2, if your son or daughter's acting the way you wouldn't tolerate at home, let's work together because 2 voices are better than 1. 3, if your son or daughter wants to improve, let's talk to figure out what we can do to work together to get them to the right places to get better. 3 things you should never talk about because these are not your jobs: playing time strategy and other people on the team. Those aren't your job. So I think the constant education about we're working this together, but we have specific roles, help that as they're looking at the emotional part of that. Now, coming back to what we said, the ride home. If your kid talks to you, I'm with you. Be a listening board. And I think you can talk if it's about effort and behavior. Don't get into strategy. Okay. Don't get into playing time. But if it's on effort and attitude, talk to them. But I had a funny thing happen to me last year in Ohio. Dad came up to me after the presentation and he had this grin on his face, and I knew this was going to be a good story. He said, "We do it different." He goes, "My son wants to talk about it. I need time and space to recover from the game. I won't let him talk to me." How great
Okay.
he recognized that, right? Don't talk to, we're
Right.
going to stay apart until
I love
I'm
that.
better. I love that. I loved it.
That's great. All right. So let's go ahead and move on a little bit. So let's talk about what's changed over the past 20 years. You've been a part of Proactive for 20 years or longer,
Yep.
you've been there
Yep.
for a long time. Let's look at what have you seen some of the biggest changes that have happened in youth sports, what the evolution of sports. We kind of touched on some of this earlier, but what do you think maybe 1 or 2 of the biggest changes you've seen happen
Yeah.
in youth sports?
Well, I think we talked about, let's focus first of all on what we've talked about. It's become year round, it's become money driven, and it's become, specialization. Those we've talked about those are hindrances. Okay. I don't mind some of the travel. I don't think you should be traveling every weekend, but if you get an experience, go have an experience. Problem is, I have to do this every weekend. We're tiring them out. We're spending billions of dollars for whatever. On the other hand, I think the 2 other things that I think are huge are this. There used to be a time when youth sports was about educational athletics. High school sports was about educational athletics. College sports was about educational athletics. Professional sports was about business athletics. That's getting squeezed.
Yes.
College sports is no longer about educational athletics. And people will say, well, that's a Division I thing. No, it's not. It looks different. NIL is in my aspect has changed Division I to a business model. But guess what? D2, NAI, and D3 is also a business model. They may not be giving you NIL money, but you're not getting full rides at most of those schools either. You're coming in so you can get a scholarship of 30,000 or 20,000 so you could pay 20,000 to come to their school. That's a business model. Okay, as it comes through. Youth sports has turned into a business model. You got guys making lots of money off of coaching and running clubs. So all of a sudden, everything's getting squeezed in an educational model at the middle school and high school level. And that's hard because it's different than everybody else. So we have to be very clear about our purpose and mission. Then here's the biggest difference. You've probably heard this. We've all heard it. We just don't have any leaders anymore. I don't buy that. I think we better train them, because here's what's happened in youth sports that's changed everything. I'm 62. My first youth sport, Little League Baseball at age 8. Basketball, which I played in college, 6th grade. Football, I was recruited, was 7th grade. You go down to somebody that's about 35 or 40, their youth sport probably experience started at age 5 or 6. When do our kids start today? 3 or 4. 2 in some places. Okay. You know what the difference is? Everything's now adult controlled. Since 2, 3, or 4, everything's been organized for them, planned for them. They don't have to get creative. Okay. When we were 2, 3, and 4, we were playing in the street, the park, and the playground with no parents around. You know what that mean we did? Organize ourselves, manage ourselves, led ourselves, got creative because we didn't know rules. And lastly was this. Here's the best one. We got really good at conflict resolution, because if we didn't, somebody got beat up or the ball went home. Right? That's what we did. Now, adults solve all our kids' problems. It's not that our kids can't lead. We don't give them the chance to lead. That, to me, has been the biggest change in youth sports.
Yeah. There's a lot of truth to that. And so for me as coaches now, it's teaching them leadership, because of the dynamics have changed, that we have to learn how to teach leadership. And so if I'm a coach and you're trying to find, because when you got your team, you're like, wow, this kid's really good. This kid's got really good work ethic. He has potential to be a leader, but he's just not that guy. He's not that, doesn't have that personality. But yet, then you look at, you got another kid that's working his butt off, might not be the most talented guy, and somebody I think should be looked up to as a leader, but the kids, their perspective is like, I'm going to look at the kid over here that's everything, scoring all the points, getting all the attention, and that's where my attention's at, and not looking at the person who's putting in the work, putting in the grind. So what is some techniques, or what is some advice coaches can have on building leadership on the team? What is a couple things we could do to try to build that leadership? Because it's there, but I think it needs some guidance, and I think coaches need to learn how to, and not just coaches, I think teachers, I think parents, how do we create that leadership, or develop it, or what are some techniques we can use?
Yeah, I think and the great news is we're in a time of life where we got all sorts of resources in front of us, so let's use them. And so I think one thing I would say from a broader perspective is this: leadership is not reserved for people with titles. So don't look to 2 or 3 people to lead. Look to your whole team to lead. Okay. What I said last night, I was with a team over at K-State. What I said last night: seniors lead, juniors lead, sophomores lead, freshmen lead. Seniors, let the freshmen lead. If you won't let the freshmen lead just because you're a senior, you're not a leader. You're entitled. You need to lead. And leaders understand sometimes the best thing I could do as a leader is follow. And if there's a freshman that can lead, even though they don't have a title, let them lead and you follow them in that area, and I'll follow them in this area. I think the second thing for coaches is to understand this: I don't need 1 or 2 people to do it all. I can use my whole team to get leadership. Now, one person may do one thing and one may do 4 or 5 things, but let's get everybody engaged, because if everybody leads, the ceiling rises. Now, as it comes to techniques, I think we can't wait for the season to start to talk about leadership. It has to be an ongoing thing all year long. But it doesn't have to be ultimate time consuming. Depending on age and age appropriateness, think about how many podcasts like this are out there. Think about how many videos, just short videos, are there you can use. We could do a book study, just something like that. Bruce's booklet, 7 Ways to Lead. We can walk through that, not do it all in one shot. We'll talk about it. But then here's the thing: I may have 7 chapters. Well, guess what? Okay. Today, I want Sandy and I want Kim to talk about chapter 1. Okay. Next week, I'm going to have 2 other people talk. Give them ownership. Let them do it, not you do it for them. So I think use the resources we have from technology, spend time with them, but let them take ownership of it. You build your leadership program under that, you'll be in good shape. I think I've seen every type of leadership work. We're going to go with a captain's council. That can work. We're going to go with 2 captains. That can work. But wherever that is, I think the big thing is we have to engage the whole team and we have to educate the whole team.
Love it. Anything you want to add to that? Or-
No, I think that's right.
yeah,
That's exactly what is needed.
totally. Yeah. Again, went back to ownership. That's a huge thing to, because that's one thing that kids struggle with.
Ownership.
Ownership and significance. All right. Okay. Let's talk. We got a couple more things to talk about, and then we'll be done here. Let's talk about practical takeaways for coaches. What's the first truth today's coaches need to hear? What is something coaches need to hear right now?
You can't hope or wish for culture on your team. You have to build culture on your team. There's the truth. Okay. It's not just going to happen because we got good kids. You better build it. So that's one I would throw at them. 2, don't have standards that you won't hold people to. I don't need you to be good at a million things. I need you to be good at 2 or 3 things, but you have to have the line where we're going to make sure we reach those. Okay. Be good at 2 or 3 things, but be there. Bruce has this saying, which I love. Great teams don't implode. They fray a little bit at a time. And we start allowing things to happen, you're going to start fraying your culture. Hold your culture high. So those are probably the 2 biggest things. Be consistent with your culture at all times, accept nothing below your standard. And second is be intentional about it because you can't just hope for it. Those are the 2 biggest truths.
Okay. How does a coach earn trust quickly? How
They
do you
don't.
build that trust? You don't. It happens
You
over
don't.
time, right?
Saying that, I think what you have is you have some leeway because you've been given a title. Now, it's different than it used to be. When you and I were coming through, if a coach or a teacher got coach or teacher put in front of their name, there was instant trust. That's not there anymore. Okay. And I'm okay with that. Let's earn it. But it does give you a ramp to at least get there. Okay. It's not instant no trust, but they're going to come in and look at you and say, okay, you got the job, you got the title, show me why. So now I got this ramp to work with. And we talk about 3 things that coaches have to do to build trust. And trust is the most important thing. Without it, you won't get any place. Here's the 3 things. You better be professionally prepared. You better personally care. And you better have purposeful, consistent character. They're going to test you. Do you know what you're talking about? You better be prepared with your sport. You better be prepared with your skill knowledge and how to teach it. Second, they want to know you care about them as a person, not just an athlete. Okay. You got to know their story a little bit, get to know them. But third is, I can't ask a young person to come prepared if I'm not prepared. I can't ask a young person to be on time if I'm not on time. I can't ask a young person to not be on their phone if I'm on my phone. Words and actions have to align.
Perfect. All right. Couple more things. What was one of your most powerful on-court locker room moments? Is there something that really has really stuck out for you in your own personal journey that go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think you mentioned, I already mentioned it, was that freshman JV coach that looked at me and said, when you believe. That was probably the most
That's
impactful
it.
moment. That's the most
Yeah.
impactful moment. There's a couple others, but that's the one that I always look at.
And I love it. Uh, let's a little lightning round here. What was, like you said, you've had a lot of you've coached for a while. What was one of the favorite gyms or events you've ever visited, I guess, during your
From a fun
experience of your
standpoint,
job?
okay, a little bit
Yeah.
off, but it was the Masters, and I love that. But there's a couple reasons. One, it kind of what I said earlier about honor the past. When you're on that course, you instantly start thinking about some of the greats that have been there before you. And I'm just walking it. I'm not playing it, but you're looking at Amen Corner in person. You're thinking, you go back to, recent shots, but you also go back to some of those great, man, what was Ben Hogan thinking when he was here? It tended, that to me was very, but here's the other thing that day, this was many years ago. Okay. And one of them just passed away, Fuzzy Zeller, but we got the chance to walk the first 3 holes just following Arnold Palmer, Fuzzy Zeller, and the guy by the name of Hank Keeney, who was the amateur. And why that was so important that day was I watched Fuzzy and Arnold take this amateur that had never played there before and teach him about the Masters and how you have to play the greens and how you have to play the contour for 3 holes. They were playing their game in a practice round, but they were teaching that young player how to be better. That impacted me. Here's these 2 greats that could have ignored this kid. They didn't ignore him. They passed on the legacy. So coming back, honor the past, impact the future. That's what those 2 were doing.
I love that. That's incredible. That's an experience that would definitely burn in my mind. So I'm going to leave that there. I don't think there's anything more we can talk about there. So I do one more segment. I always do this all the time, and I always do what we call unusual mascots. So what I do is I always pick high schools from around the country that have very unusual mascot names. Up here in Idaho, we have the criminals, or if you know, or I'm sorry, the maniacs. I apologize. The maniacs are out of Orfino. The criminals are out of Yuma, Arizona. But I usually pick something unique. You are very familiar with the NAIA, so I decided to go college round. I am in Cascade Conference country. I went to Eastern Oregon University, College of Idaho, Northwest, all the schools up there. Very familiar with Oregon Tech with Coach Miles. I'm sure you know Coach Miles.
One of the best.
One of the best, dude, Danny. And so my father-in-law, Amanda's dad, actually knew Dan pretty well because he went to Oregon Tech. So great coach. So our trip is taking us to Washington, and we're looking at Evergreen. We're going Evergreen State. All right, we're going to Evergreen State. We are looking at the Gooey Ducks of Evergreen State. Gooey Duck is a huge clam, basically, and so that's what it is.
Well, thank you, because I've known it for 30 years and I've never known what it was. So now I know what it is.
It's a huge clam. I mean, they're gigantic. They can get. I mean, they're a type of gaper clams. And we're talking like I don't know. I mean, you can't see where I'm at, but something like they're big. So that's what it is. It's where Evergreen's at. It's outside of Olympia. The mascot itself is obviously unique. It's right there. The school has its own access to the beach, they're in the southern part of the Puget Sound. Their motto is "Let it all hang out," which pairs perfectly because they're a liberal school.
Yeah.
The Gooey Ducks, it's unique. The actual mascot that they use, it's very interesting. I'm just going to leave it there. If anybody ever wants to look up the Evergreen Gooey Duck, just take a look at their mascot. It's named Speedy. It's its official name. Came from 1979 is when they got their name. Evergreen State College. The campus is set on 1,000 acres in second growth forests. Trails leading to the school's own saltwater beach and tidelands. You got the school itself is very unique on how they do things. So if you've ever seen the movie Accepted, it's kind of a slapstick comedy where these people make up their own school and they make up their own courses and majors. Kind of like that. It's a student takes a 116 credit takes a class per quarter, and then they juggle it between multiple separate classes. You get no formal major. It is designed for them to create their own program and build their own whatever they want to do. Instead of letter grades, the faculty writes a narrative evaluation for each student's work. That's how they do it. It's very interesting, and nationally recognized environmental leadership and very student-centered culture, environmental studies, organic farming, indigenous partnerships with some of the local tribes around the area. Like I said, they compete in the NIA, the Cascade Conference. Student population, 2,500. This was in 2024. Rather smaller school, kind of like where I went to. About 209 graduates. Local economy to the area. Olympia is the capital of Washington, so a lot of government jobs. Cost of living is up there. Just the state of Washington itself is expensive. Average income per household is around $74,000. Tuition for the school for residents is around $8,000. They have a exchange program for some of the local, I think some of the states around the area, they can get in a little around the same price, but out of states around $30,000. So yeah, Gooey Ducks of Evergreen State is our mascot of the week. So,
I've been on
yeah,
campus many times. Yep, it's a unique place.
yep, yeah. It's a beautiful area. I mean, I got family up in Washington and stuff like that, so I love going up in that area and checking it
Gorgeous,
out.
gorgeous
So,
campus.
but
It's a gorgeous campus.
yep, yes, it is. All right, Rob, anything you want to add or anything you want to say before we go?
No, I just to the coaches that are listening out there, just be intentional, but thank you. That's the most I think just thank you for being working with kids. We need them. Uh, sports or activities, whatever your kids are involved with, it's something that really can relate to where they're going in life. And so let's use it as a platform to help them out.
All right. I'd like to thank everybody for listening. Amanda, anything to say?
No, thank you
Okay.
for letting me join you on it.
All right. Rob, thanks again. I appreciate you being here. Everybody, thanks for listening. Comment, make comments about this, like us. I'd love to listen to people and give their ideas for episodes. So please, I appreciate everybody listening and everybody take care. Bye.